So I know we're just over a week removed from it, but obviously AEW All Out 2020 is now in the books. Is that a good place for us to start, do you think, Anu?
Yeah, sounds good then.
Yeah, okay. So I think, to sum it up in a couple of words, this was an absolute shit show, was it? I think the first half of the show in particular was probably some of the most chaotic, ridiculous, and in many cases sort of dangerous and irresponsible sort of examples of wrestling that we've seen in a long time. So yeah, let's get into this show. What are your kind of initial thoughts on All Out as a pay-per-view?
I think we were discussing this just before we went on air, and it sort of got into that territory where it's almost so bad that it's laughable. And again, I mean, I know we're sort of building a rep as those guys who hate on AEW and we're the old men of pro wrestling or whatever. But this was genuinely a terrible show. I don't really know what positives you could come away from AEW All Out. I mean, I suppose you could say that the last two matches were passable, but apart from that, this was an exhibition of how not to book a wrestling show.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I know, like you say, we do talk a lot about AEW, but we're willing to admit when things are good. There's definitely some aspects of the product that we enjoy. But yeah, from start to finish as a pay-per-view, this was just god awful. And I think anyone who tries to defend it is just being a little bit too much of an apologist for AEW personally. And yeah, I think, we'll go into some of the matches in more detail in a second, but like you say, I think get into that territory where it's kind of almost so bad it's kind of entertaining, and like it may be kind of fun for us to sit here and talk about how bad we think the product is, but it is a bit of a shame when you think about it, because when it all came out and it first started, it was a very exciting thing for wrestling fans to have that kind of semi sort of competition again for the WWE. Something different, and I suppose we can't sort of argue that AEW hasn't taken some fans away from WWE. I mean, a lot of people are watching it. I know it hit over 1 million viewers last episode of Dynamite, which we have to note as well. But when you actually get down to the nitty gritty of the content, it's just so amateur in minor league, and I just think like, how long is this going to go on for? Like, are they still just going on that fact that they're the new kid on the block, so to speak, or do you think people are just so kind of attuned to the kind of gymnastics, like this sort of new way of wrestling, that they just don't see the wood from the trees almost? I don't know.
No, I definitely think they have found their niche to an extent, but they're sort of riding this wave of just being that alternative to WWE. And they cater to a very esoteric, very hardcore section of the wrestling fan base, which is which is sort of grown disillusioned with the WWE product, and to them, it's sort of a situation where these people are so starved for anything that they'll eat stale bread, and in this case, AEW is their stale bread.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's a good way to put it, actually. Yeah. I mean, I suppose from my point of view, I mean, obviously, I know you didn't watch much of the New Japan product, but there was this kind of sort of slight rumble going on with some of the elite guys, and kind of like under the tutelage of people who kind of knew what they were doing, they were kind of putting out some half decent matches and sort of credible enough storylines that you thought, okay, maybe these guys know what they're doing. Maybe if they were ever to come to WWE, they would maybe change wrestling, change that wrestling landscape, or maybe if New Japan were to grow their products, then maybe they'd pose a genuine threat to WWE. The problem is, though, that they decided to go off on their own and form their own company, and for me anyway, I think All Out is the kind of inevitable result of that happening. It's a bunch of sort of self-entitled wrestlers who think that just by jumping around and basically just using trampolines for 20 minutes is what we want as a wrestling fan base at the moment. And unfortunately, like I say, this is the product that we get, and it's such a huge disappointment from where we could have been maybe half a year ago.
This is essentially, I mean, we've seen this story before, right? This is essentially the end days of WCW, where you have like a bunch of wrestlers running Riot and the inmates doing running the Asylum. As you so correctly put it, Dan, these guys are just indulging themselves and doing whatever they want to give themselves a kick. And I'm not sure if they're not willing to do it or this is what they think good professional wrestling is. But whatever the case, we are not getting good professional wrestling from AEW on a consistent basis.
Yeah, I think, and just to kind of take us into the actual show itself, I mean, talking about that kind of inmates running the Asylum thing, I think that really came to a head during the Matt Hardy incident. So, obviously, people have presumably have seen the match, but Hardy takes quite a nasty bump, but hits his head on the concrete floor. Clearly has got the signs of concussion straight away. He's barely able to stand up. Doesn't seem to know exactly where he is, to be honest. But I suppose that kind of instinct within him to carry on is there, and obviously he wants to carry on with the match. And the referees are all trying to obviously stop him from doing it. And you just think that in a competent company run by people who know professional wrestling and know the risks involved, they would have just stopped this straight away. I think the fact that they allowed this match to continue after a very short break and the manner in which it happened, they had to climb another big scaffolding thing. You just think, at some point this is going from just bad wrestling to potentially sort of dangerous wrestling, if that makes sense.
Yeah, you're right, and they're not doing the performers any favors. Now, I know that WWE's labor practices are hardly anything to admire, and in fact, they're actually pretty poor, as anybody will tell you. But the thing is, whenever WWE screws something up, and just recently they sort of tried to put a clamp on their performers using third party platforms such as Twitch and YouTube and stuff like that, and we all came down hard on WWE, and rightfully so. But here you look at AEW, and Tony Khan, the guy who's running the company, comes out and says that we had a doctor look at Matt Hardy and he cleared a concussion protocol. What half-assed voodoo witch doctor kind of guy took a look at Matt Hardy, because the guy clearly wasn't okay to continue. The man was in hospital overnight and it was pretty evident that he had a concussion. I mean, you don't care about your performers, Tony Khan. You're just as much of a money-grubbing promoter as anybody else.
Exactly, yeah. You just hope that there would have been somebody backstage with the wherewithal or the sort of the responsibility to say to Matt Hardy, like, this really isn't worth it. I mean, I think what makes it worse is the fact that you never want to see people get legitimately hurt in wrestling, but then there's some occasions where it kind of has this kind of perverse kind of positive effect on things. So like I'm thinking maybe Owen Hart dropping Stone Cold on his head in SummerSlam '97, and the fact that they had to kind of scramble that match together quickly, just get that quick sort of awkward roll up and then just get the hell out of there. If you're gonna have to see it through, then do something like that, but don't go out there again and then climb a scaffold and put everybody at risk. You could see that Hardy was struggling to kind of get up there. He was very kind of shaky, and it's a dangerous thing to do at the best of times, especially after what had happened to him. And at the end of the day, it's a throwaway feud between two underneath guys, basically. There's no consequence to this. There's no title on the line. I know obviously they had this bullshit stipulation with if Matt Hardy lost, he'd have to leave AEW, but I'm sure fans could just put that aside and just be like, okay, fine, let's just end it here. We don't actually need a clear winner here. So yeah, it's never good to put people at risk, but especially for something as insignificant and inconsequential as this, is just really kind of rubbed me up the wrong way.
No, Dan, you don't understand. You see, when you have a loser leaves town type of stipulation, what that means is the performer must die or be left permanently paralyzed.
Well, it seems to be, yeah.
Leaving the match incomplete is just not an option. Because there are so many millions of people watching AEW.
Yeah. I just worry that because Matt Hardy, we know he's obviously he's had this history of being a quote unquote like an extreme wrestler. He's been in lots of TLC matches and everything, but he's still been around long enough to. And I suppose it's difficult to say because you don't know exactly what his mind frame was at the time. Obviously the the professional in him would want to have continued the match. But if he had any semblance of sense about him at that time, he should have realised, he's a family man. He's certainly not at the peak of his career anymore. It would have been fine for him just to sit this one out. I just worry if, somebody like Darby Allin gets into this position, because we know how reckless he is with himself anyway. So it just feels like something bad is going to happen if they don't sort of grow up, I suppose, as a company.
Yeah, I agree with you. They certainly need to get their stuff together. And I just can't help but go back to Tony Khan's comments on this issue. He's sort of hand-waving this as though it's nothing to be concerned about, and it's something so severe. I mean, Matt Hardy could have been permanently paralyzed. Why would you commission this stunt, let alone let him continue? What sort of concussion protocols do you have in place that this guy is allowed to go on and finish this match? I mean, this is just coming across as such a poorly run company, and the culture they have, in the workplace is also no good. It seems to almost engender this sort of recklessness, as you said.
Yeah. And again, the worst part of it all is that the product overall isn't very good either. So people are kind of putting their lives at risk for something that is just amateur and minor league overall anyway. It's really sad to see to some of these guys, kind of Matt Hardy, Jericho, end their kind of illustrious careers in AEW. I mean, and I suppose that kind of might lead us on to kind of talking about the Chris Jericho match as well, but it's just something about AEW and sort of guys like this in this moment is kind of stripping them of their dignity a little bit. I don't know if that's a bit harsh, but because I know Jericho has been a highlight for AEW since it started, but at the moment I don't really get what he's trying to get out of this personally.
Yeah, see, I was going to compare it to Michael Jordan with the Washington Wizards, because it's this legendary player on an average team. But by that point, Jordan's skill as a basketball player and his athleticism and everything had diminished. But I'm not sure that's the case with Chris Jericho. I mean, Chris Jericho is certainly still at the peak of his powers as a performer. It's just that he's part of a company that's putting on a very, very substandard product, as we said. And Dan, in terms of quality, I'm not sure that AEW is better than TNA was during its time on Spike TV. It's just that it's been marketed as this alternative to WWE, which is why it's garnering traction.
Yeah, and there's been this big fanfare about the fact that they've managed to get 1 million viewers for an episode of Dynamite. I mean, it's an episode immediately after a pay-per-view, so you would expect people to tune in. And I know obviously there's NBA going on at the moment as well, but it just, in the grand scheme of things, it's really not that big an achievement, really. It goes back to what we said before. It's not exactly like they're bringing in new or lapsed fans back into wrestling. It's just the fact that people who watch WWE and have such low standards over there kind of come over to AEW, and this is the kind of standards they expect anyway. So it's just short change. That's how I see it anyway.
Yeah, and just like WWE, AEW also obviously has moments that can entertain you, but it's just this very cultish sort of vibe that's sustaining this product at the moment. I'm not sure how else to describe it, but that's really it. I mean, once you cast an objective eye on the AEW product, there's nothing special about it. They have a bunch of wrestlers who have no sense of in-ring psychology. They have mediocre creative. They cut a bunch of shoot promos with the insider innuendo, which nobody cares about anymore. We're done with all of that crap. CM Punk's hit promo was 9 years ago now. We just want to watch entertaining storylines. And just like TNA, they sign every WWE cast off there is. So what about this product is meant to be revolutionary? There's nothing. They even have a world champion who's a poor man, Stone Cold Steve Austin. And that guy was popular 25 years ago.
Yeah. The whole story arc with John Moxley is really starting to get to me as well at the moment. I was a big fan of Dean Ambrose when he first came to WWE. I know he had a bit of a career before that, but who cares about CZW? He was Dean Ambrose in the Shield. I thought, this guy's got charisma. This guy could be a potential pretty big star for the WWE at some point. Comes over to AEW after, I guess, you could say he was being underused in WWE. I think that's probably fair to say. And then initially, again, there was this fanfare of, like, it's John Moxley, he's unchained now, he's going to do what he wants. Problem is, he doesn't have the wrestling brain to do what he wants.
Exactly. And I think that's true for so many people in this company.
Yeah. It's like, you're unchaining them, but what you're doing is unchaining a lot of mediocre talent that can't really get themselves over without, like, a proper company behind them. I mean, John Moxley doesn't understand, like, basic wrestling anyway. Like, I don't know, he's the most heelish babyface champion I've ever seen in my life. Like, the MJF main event with like, basically should have been the other way around. Like, MJF was clearly the babyface in this. You're, like, blood all over his face, like, fighting from the bottom. Moxley just pulls out the paradigm shift when he wasn't supposed to, and what has happened to just basic kind of good guy bad guy dynamics in wrestling? Like, I don't know.
I think their idea was just to show you that MJF could push John Moxley to his limits, because John Moxley is this all-conquering champion or whatever, but it just didn't come across like that. John Moxley just came across as such a heel, as you just said. It didn't work for either guy. I mean, well, I suppose it did work for MJF to an extent, but it did no favors for John Moxley, who is floundering as a champion.
Yeah.
No, Dan, I think the problem with John Moxley is, like you said, he certainly isn't a guy who can be given full creative freedom. And he certainly didn't work in the WWE environment, where they didn't see anything in him. So I don't really know where he goes, because I don't know, because it's just unfortunate for him, really.
And I think the worst part is that, because my initial thought here is to just get the title off him immediately, but I really couldn't see anyone worthy enough to give it to at the moment.
I think MJF could be a great heel champion, to be honest with you. I thought he was primed to take the title off John Moxley.
Yeah. I mean, well, I'm still very positive on MJF. He's again one of the sort of few highlights of AEW that I tune in for. But I don't know. I don't see, and this is so kind of back to front anyway, because obviously the whole thing about wrestling is, the money's in the chase, so to speak. So you kind of, but then I kind of want to see MJF chasing the title. But then that should make him a babyface in my mind. But he's been brilliant as a heel, so I can't. It's weird to kind of know what to do. Like, maybe you could just give him the title straight away, but then you have the problem of whether there's enough kind of good babyfaces for him to face. I quite like him chasing the championship belt, if that makes sense. Even though I shouldn't, because he's a heel. I don't know. This is my level of confusion with the product at the moment, anyway.
No, I agree with you, Dan. I think AEW does need a heel world champion with a bunch of babyface challengers coming after him. But again, I mean, let's see where they go, because I don't know if you can, because I think you can definitely go back to an MJF and Moxley program, although it looks like they're going with Lance Archer next. And Lance Archer isn't exactly the second coming of The Rock, so let's see how that goes.
This is another, and again, this may just be me being a bit of a nitpicker, but I think there's too many title contenders in AEW. Like, it seems like every pay-per-view there has to be someone who comes out of it with a title shot. I think it just really discredits the belt. I think WWE are guilty of it as well. That the belt is defended too many times. I'm not advocating for a Brock Lesnar situation where you don't see the champion for months and months, but it shouldn't be defended at every pay-per-view, and there shouldn't always be this new challenger all the time. So, like, Lance Archer suddenly getting a title shot out of nowhere just seems really kind of like unordered and sort of chaotic as well. I mean, it proves that there's no kind of structure and no kind of long-term planning going on.
Yeah. I don't know how far ahead they've planned to. I have a feeling that they're sort of looking to do a John Moxley Kenny Omega program for the world title at some point down the road, but I don't know if they have any idea how they want to get there.
Yeah.
I'd like to know, Dan, who the hell puts this stuff together? Like, who is booking all of this crap? Is it Tony Khan?
Well, I mean, you drew the parallel already with WCW. That maybe that is the problem. There's just too many cooks spoiling the broth. Like, and you've got like, yeah. So go on.
No. Go ahead, Dan. I'm sorry to interrupt.
I say is like, you've got too many cooks spoiling the broth, but then you've got like the wrestlers themselves obviously involved in it. You've got obviously the Young Bucks. Like, I don't know what position they hold in the company, but it's pretty high. And Cody and Omega, and I just get the feeling that there's not that one figure within that's really kind of driving things. Maybe.
Right. And they're against hiring writers or anything like that. So, I mean, I guess we'll see where it goes, but. As of right now, this is a very poor quality product. I mean, it's we have to be honest.
Yeah, I think things are getting so bad at the moment that I kind of like the prospect of a John Moxley Kenny Omega title feud. At least it's something. Like it's not something I would look forward to necessarily, but it would kind of give the company that bit of structure. I mean, I don't know. I mean, maybe they're going to continue with Moxley and MJF because the promo that MJF hit on Dynamite seems to suggest that sort of dynamic was going to continue, maybe. But they need that kind of long-term stability going on, and I think Omega and Moxley could be the two guys just to kind of cement things a little bit. I know that you're not exactly a massive fan of Kenny Omega, so I'm sure you're relishing this opportunity. But it's the best we've got at the moment.
I don't understand what a Kenny Omega John Moxley feud would even look like. Neither of these guys can sink their teeth into a promo to save their lives. So what are these guys going to do to promote the match? Is Kenny Omega going to bring out a broomstick while the other guy brings out like a barbed wire baseball bat and just smack themselves for like 4 weeks on television? I don't really know.
But then there's plenty of wrestling fans out there that would love that.
Well, I mean, at the end, after All Out, I mean, Kenny Omega was making references to bringing back his cleaner persona. Well, fantastic. Nobody gives a shit.
Yeah.
The problem isn't whether or not you're the cleaner. The problem is you don't know what the fuck professional wrestling is.
I mean, you've touched on this already. I'm so tired of this whole elite storyline bullshit. Like, it really, really needs to end now. I don't care. I couldn't care less. Like, who is splitting up from who and who's mad at who. It just all seems very just like playground childhood nonsense at the moment, and it's just and they're kind of riding on the fact that they've been together as this kind of elite group for a long time. But then people who are just coming into AEW are like, I didn't watch New Japan, I don't really get the history behind this. You just seem to be this like bunch of, I want to say semi-talented wrestlers that are all bickering with each other. It's like, I don't know. I think personally Hangman Page needs to get as far away from them as possible, because I really think he's got something in him that could really give him a good sort of singles push. But like the promo he cut with Tony Schiavone, like the interview that he did with Tony Schiavone last week, was just like, what have they done to the character? They've already ruined it. And I'm just so fed up of the whole elite. Anything to do with the elite, I just want it to end.
No, Dan, the thing that gets me with the elite is that they make all of these inside references on television to there being the elite web series or digital series or whatever you want to call it. Now, the problem is, I can barely sit through the Dynamite television show. I am not going to go watch these buffoons for another half an hour on YouTube.
Yeah, exactly. That speaks to the problem overall, isn't it? It's like they've got this kind of very insular like bunch of wrestling fans that they know that anything they do, basically the wrestling fans will just lap it up, with no serious intention to kind of grow themselves into a credible kind of global company.
Yeah, that's what it is, and they're just living off the goodwill that they have with this, with this group of fans. Well, I mean, I suppose that is a good thing, but as somebody who wants a good television show and good pay-per-views and things like that, it just doesn't work. Like, they're just living off this weird fanaticism, and it sort of drives me crazy.
Is there anything positive we can talk about in the show? Like, I mean, would you say that the main event was the match of the night, or was there anything else that you liked in the show?
Well, I mean, There were the two. There were the. Well, I think the main event and the co-main event were the only two possible matches that they had on the entire card. If we want to call it the match of the night, we could do so, but it's nothing spectacular. I mean, it was an average match. I mean, you see better than that every week, really.
Yeah. I'd like to just quickly nod towards the women's championship match because Thunder Rosa is I've been watching NWA Power for quite a while. I know it's sort of not really on anymore, but Thunder Rosa was one of the main things that I sort of tuned in for because she is genuinely a brilliant talent. And the prospect of her kind of coming to AEW, initially I was very worried because I thought she just basically jumped ship and was going to join as a full-time competitor, but when I realised that it was like a championship versus championship thing, I was kind of relieved because NWA, that's where she should stay. But then I expected a lot more from the match, even though the match wasn't terrible. What did you think of Thunder Rosa? Did you know anything about her before? Or?
Oh no, Dan, I knew that she was the NWA Women's Champion and everything, and they were trying to do this feud to determine the best, quote unquote. But I wasn't blown away by the match. I mean, there were a few nice transitions and counters and stuff like that, and it was smoother than most of the matches on the card, just because it wasn't the somersault tope con hero tope suicida type fare that we see from most AEW matches. So I did appreciate that they actually did a wrestling match, but I appreciated it. I expected a little bit more.
Yeah, like I say, the match was a bit of a letdown.